This was published on February 9th. The future of money. This is straight off the International Monetary Fund website. Gearing up for central bank digital currency. And it's Kristalina Georgieva, her speech, the IMF Managing Director, Atlantic Council, Washington, D.C. So I have a few things highlighted from her speech. She said, quote, "We have moved beyond conceptual discussions of CBDCs, and we are now in the phase of experimentation. Central banks are rolling up their sleeves and familiarizing themselves with the bits and bytes of digital money. These are still early days for CBDCs, and we don't quite know how far and how fast they will go. What we know is that central banks are building capacity to harness new technologies to be ready for what may lie ahead. If CBDCs are designed prudently, they can potentially offer more resilience, more safety, greater availability, and lower costs than private forms of digital money. That is clearly the case when compared to unbacked crypto assets that are inherently volatile, and even the better managed and regulated stablecoins may not be quite a match against a stable and well-designed central bank digital currency." Yay! All told, around 100 countries are now exploring it. And it lists a bunch of CBDCs, and then they have 3 lessons that they've taken away from what they've done so far. Lesson number 1, no one size fits all. So you can't just have one set of CBDC. It's got to be sort of regionally tailored. Lesson number 2, financial stability and privacy considerations are paramount to the design of CBDCs. Oh, you don't say. Privacy is a concern, apparently. It says here that smaller holdings, limits on holdings of CBDCs also helps meet people's desire for privacy while guarding against illicit financial flows. Smaller holdings are allowed without the need for full identification if the risks of money laundering and terrorist financing are low. This could be a boon for financial inclusion. At the same time, larger transactions and holdings require more stringent checks, as you would expect if you deposit a bag of cash at the bank. So, again, just moving over the same kind of rules that are in place in the banking system now over to the CBDC thing. In many countries, privacy concerns are a potential deal breaker when it comes to CBDC legislation and adoption. So it's vital that policymakers get the mix right. So they already know that privacy is going to be a problem here. And that brings her to lesson number 3, which is balance. We must balance in order for everybody to enjoy CBDCs. And then she talks about working hard. And she says, fittingly, even the great inventor Thomas Edison acknowledged that, quote, "There is no substitute for hard work. And this is what we emphasize at the IMF. This hard work has already advanced. We are supporting countries in their CBDC experiments." She keeps saying experiments.
Yeah.
She's admitting that this is one big experiment to understand big picture trade-offs, blah, 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 about digital money. So the IMF is ready to roll out CBDCs, but we're still in the experimental phase. And I think this is part of a greater agenda to reset the entire world economy. And to kind of explain or illustrate the fact, I'm going to run through real quick some rabbit hole stuff here.
Come, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
If you recall the Trump Planet or Planet Trump cover from The Economist magazine back in late 2016, they talked about it as the world in 2017, and they had the 8 tarot cards there on the cover. I think they laid out much more than just 2017. But the Tower card, which is the first card, is the card I want to focus on because I think it explains quite a bit here. And my sociology education, my college education came through, Basil, as I was looking at this Tower card. So historically, or just not historically, but just in terms of people commenting on the Tower card, cultists and whatnot, they all consider the Tower card, the lightning that's coming down from the top, to represent God or divine inspiration or revelation. There's other cards that are, the other Tower cards all depict this lightning that's coming down from heaven and this power that's coming down and striking the tower. And I have a picture here of it's an Etsy thing here, the Tower card. And in this particular one from the Arcana, It depicts the tower card with the lightning coming from an all-seeing eye at the top there. So, it's interesting that the occultists would consider this lightning coming from God, when biblically speaking, we have Luke 10:18 where it talks about, I saw Satan fall like lightning, right? So it's kind of the opposition there.
It's the connection with Prometheus,
yeah.
And stealing the fire, bringing it down, bringing knowledge to man, falling like Lucifer. It's all kind of connected.
Right.
And of course, when they say God, they don't mean Yahweh.
No.
They mean
their God, which
whatever is above Yahweh.
Turns out to be part of the beast system there. So, yes. So it's interesting how there's that direct flippening, or the opposite, which is common with the occult. And so you look at this card and the tower. So I've also seen people talk about the occultists and arcana people say like, hey, this is a Tower of Babel type of thing where God strikes the tower and breaks it down, for certain change to happen or whatever. And the tower in the tower card on the Economist cover for Trump Planet is interesting because in the card, you have the hammer and sickle flag on the left, a crowd of people holding the hammer and sickle flag, which is sort of the East, right? The China-Russia communist alliance kind of thing. And then you have a crowd on the other side, on the right side, representing the West through Christianity, because they have a big cross with the guy hanging on it, which is assuming is Christianity. But the tower is interesting because it's got the 95 Theses hammered on to nailed to the door, right? And what was the year there? 1517. When Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses or proposition, which is sort of the beginning of Protestantism breaking away from the Catholic Church, right? That was a big moment. And so the tower, I think, represents capitalism that sprang from Protestantism. And I say that directly, again, my sociology education coming through here, because I remembered that I had to read a sociologist, a turn of the century sociologist named Max Weber back in college. And Max Weber, who lived from 1864 to 1920, he wrote a book called Protestantism and the Rise of Capitalism. And in it, he argues that the work ethic that Protestantism brought, specifically through Calvinism, and he goes through a whole thing. It's very complex what he came up with. But he shows how that sentiment or that milieu brought about Western capitalism, especially in the US. And then, of course, now we are living in this unipolar, or we have been living in a unipolar world where the Western capitalist democracy rules all commerce all over the world. And that's the New World Order that was mentioned before. But now with the rise of Russia in the East, you have the splitting, right? Or if you look at the tower card here, you have the splitting and of that Protestantism being destroyed, which we've been talking about, the Great Reset, the stakeholder capitalism, and all this kind of stuff, which is sort of a masked communism or socialism. But I think something to keep in mind is that in one of the occult depictions of the tower card, two of the entities are falling out of the building. They're jumping out of the building and they're being destroyed. And so if we follow that pattern, the tower card on the Trump card, the two sides, the East and the West, communist East, Christian ethic West, they're both going to fall. Is kind of the message here with the tower thing. It's going to come at the precipice of Western democracy. That's going to be the central point of the battle, but both will fall and a new thing will rise. And that's kind of, I don't know. I get the feeling that that's the bigger agenda here. And then, of course, the only other card that has a nuclear explosion is beneath that card, the tower card, which is the death card, where you have the rider of the pale horse, and then you have the nuclear explosion in the background there. So all that to say, I think there's a greater agenda here at play, and it's you can call it World War III, but it's really the pinning of the Eastern and Western powers and create the tension, especially on the economic and financial rails, which is something that's taking place now, to create the new world order, which will emerge after this conflict that is a ever-present threat to the world and its security. So there you go.
All is going according to plan.
It's all coming together.
It's all coming together.
Yes, it's all coming together.